YouTube, have you ever looked in a mirror recently? What do you see when you look into the mirror? Well, apparently when Grombrindle looked into the mirror, he saw Belegar? Huh? No, seriously though, we got a mirror match here going on between the Dawi, and this was submitted by Rubber Duck of War, so appreciate him sending this in. I don't know the context of this match, like was it in a tournament, just playing for fun, or whatever it was, but occasionally you do end up with mirror matches. I know in tournaments it can happen by means of like a tiebreaker sometimes, or just by pick. But one way or the other, when you end up with a mirror match, you have to think completely different than you would otherwise with that faction. Typically, you were taking an army pick, for instance, and picking something that you think it'll be good against from another faction. But how do you look at a faction internal to itself can be a very interesting thing. And here we're going to see Dawi, and as expected, everything's armor-piercing and ranged. Because the Dawi are slow. They're not good at catching up with range, and they're all heavily armored, so you need armor-piercing. So look at this. Warriors with great weapons, warriors great weapons across the front. 5 Thunderers, very expected. And then back in the back, there's some cannons firing away again. Very long-range artillery. Interesting pick with cannons, though. I would almost maybe expect to see something more like a grudge thrower, but perhaps they expected other Dawi cannons. I'm not sure exactly, but deployed so far back, it would have left their own infantry very vulnerable had there been something like grudge throwers. But who knows? They're spread very wide. It would help against grudge throwers for sure. Here's Belegar. He's supported by Thane and Felix. Felix heals enemy heroes and lords that are close enough to him while he's in melee. So this is a very obvious pick for the dwarves. I need my lord to stay alive in order to win a battle. And so I'm going to pick Felix. And the same happened on the other side, but we have Grombrindle rather than Belegar. Now, Belegar is just kind of a tough all-around lord. With some support from the Thane and Felix, he'd be pretty competent in melee. By himself, he lacks the armor piercing that he would need. But, you know, he's a very defensive character as well. Now, for Rubber Duck of War, he's got a front line here of warriors, but there's also a couple Longbeards mixed in. I'm kind of low on Longbeards with great weapons, to be honest. I think they're really crappy for what you pay. They don't cost a lot, but I still think they're crappy. Giant Slayers we have on each flank, and Giant Slayers, this is an interesting matchup for them indeed because they are armor-piercing, but they retain the speed of a Slayer. You can see here that the Thunderers from the other side are getting some really nice shots in as the infantry clashes begin. However, we're going to have some interesting numbers games coming here as there is more infantry for Rubber Duck of War than it is his opponent, and now his opponent's going to find himself facing a flank plus the fire of the incoming Thunderers, which he did not immediately meet. He shot the infantry first, which makes sense. Do the damage to the infantry while it's in range. But at this point, now his Thunderers have to contend with flanking units like these Giant Slayers. And look at this one, all the way through the forest. It's going to get a clean kill on one of these cannons, and then this one here is just going to ignore the guns shooting at it and make a run for the cannons because there are Longbeards with great weapons, which are going to keep this going. So you ignore the leadership. Don't get bogged down in that fight while you're going to be shot by other guns. And you're going to see Grombrindle here, again, chasing guns. Everybody is extremely concerned about Thunderers, and they should be. If there's Thunderers left at the end of this match, you will lose as the Dawi. Like, that is a certainty. And look at this here. Ulthar's Raiders and another Ranger with great weapon that were Vanguard deployed. Those units are decent in melee, and they wouldn't want to trade from range with the Thunderers unless the Thunderers just weren't returning fire. But they could get into melee with the Thunderers and win quite handily. The Thunderers, I believe, have heavier armor, but the Ulthar's Raiders and the Rangers with great weapons both have armor-piercing weapon damage in melee. Look at this here. Longbeard lost its attack order. That's frustrating when that happens. That happens to me a lot, too. Units losing an attack order. You can see Grombrindle in a bit of a pinch here. He's trying to get out of here. He's being chased, but look at this. The Thunderers on the other side, since they're not being cornered by infantry, getting some nice shots. And, of course, the first person, look at that flash bomb off Grombrindle coming in total clutch there. So, well played. Felix on Rubber Duck's side was helping to break up some infantry fights, but he is taking some vicious fire, and Felix is an obvious target for the guns because he heals the enemy units. So he is, of course, going to be the object of unwanted affection on both sides of this matchup. Let's see what the Giant Slayers are doing. They are just shredding artillery, though a Thunderer did get free here, and they are certainly punishing one of the Giant Slayers. I believe they have the... they don't have the whirling axes because they're carrying single-handed, so they don't block some of the shots like a standard Slayer, but I don't think that makes a ton of difference in the end. Look at that. They're taking care of the cannons, and look, they're just going to move on and go for the Thunderers, as they should. No need to get tied down with the infantry. Take out the range units because that's the real scare here, and you can see the same thing's true for the other side. The Ulthar Raiders straight into melee, just going for the Thunderers, and really want to take them out. And then the same thing with the leadership here. Got to get rid of the Thunderers or else we lose. These Rangers ended up in melee with a Dwarf Warrior. Probably not ideal for them where they're going to be at. You can see a nice use of Grombrindle has no fear here, making sure this Dwarf Warrior doesn't rout. So nice play there. Let's just kind of keep looking around the battlefield here. Here's a play. Giant Slayers, their speed, going to catch up, and they'll hack through Thunderers rather well because of their armor piercing. So that'll be a great matchup. Now, remember, Slayers have really high attack. They're the only Dwarf unit outside of a Hammer that really has decent melee attack. And they're going to do well in this type of fight. They're going to do well. See some Warriors with great weapons chasing them, and some more Giant Slayers over here helping to catch up to and destroy some Thunderers. Grombrindle attacking Thunderers. These Thunderers clearing out some Longbeards. So, yeah, I mean, it is just a Thunderer chase to the end on both sides. Check this out. Felix did get routed, but managed to come back from routing. Look at this here. The Ulthar's Raider is going to catch up to this Thunderer in melee, and as I mentioned, the melee will not be pretty for the Thunderers. Not in this particular case. Ulthar's Raiders are a competent unit in melee against this type of stuff. So they're going to do well. Felix is going to swing back in there and try and take this over. He should heal better than he takes damage in this fight, but it just kind of depends on how many hits the Ulthar's Raiders land. I don't think their attack is very high, so Felix should be able to shrug off a fair number of their hits. Going to come back, swing this way. Again, just a battle for the Thunderers. Interesting mirror matchup. Thunderers, I definitely appreciate that both sides brought them in high numbers. That makes a lot of sense in a Dwarf mirror match. Felix also is, in my opinion, probably a must in a Dwarf mirror match. Cannons, I'm not so sure. I could be wrong. Maybe you want the cannons if your opponent ended up bringing something like Grudge Throwers. But then again, I don't know. Like, I feel like a Grudge Thrower would have been more value from a range. Or possibly an organ gun, but an organ gun has limited range, so that may be risky. So it is curious to me. It is curious. What do you all think of a Dwarf mirror match? What type of units do you think would be good? I agree with the infantry pick too. Mostly Warriors with great weapons. Maybe the occasional Longbeard with great weapon. I think that makes sense from both players as far as infantry pick. Belegar I'm not as familiar with as a Lord, so I'm not like intensely familiar with his ups and downs. I mean, he has great armor and a good shield here. Maybe that's the thought. Like I said, he's a pretty defensive unit. He can hold out, but he doesn't deal armor-piercing damage. But I guess maybe the thought was combined with the Thane and then supported by Felix, that they would be good. But I mean, Grombrindle is definitely the fightingest Dwarf Lord out there. He also has magic attacks, which are going to really benefit him versus other dwarves, because remember, all dwarves have an innate magic resistance. And that magic resistance is going to get bypassed by Grombrindle. And so it's going to give him a lot of extra damage. So I do feel like Grombrindle, I guess in terms of just getting into a melee with other Dwarf Lords, is going to be brutal. And he has the Flash Bomb. And that can be the difference between life and death. Like, he used it earlier to escape from a fight that may not have been good for him. And so I think it's a good pick. So nice pick by Rubber Duck of War. Again, really curious to see what you all think of this one down in the comments. Head down there. Tell me what kind of stuff you think would be good in a Dwarf mirror match. I haven't thought through every single unit here, but I guess another thing you could try to do is just go huge numbers and see if you could overwhelm an opponent, but I think that comes with risk too. Like, you could bring a bunch of warriors, like Dwarf Warriors, and they may not have, and I know there's going to be limits, especially if this was tournament play, but you have to think through it, like a ton of miners or warriors just to try and overwhelm the enemy with numbers. But I feel like that's risky too, because Thunderers are just going to be so good, and if your cheap units can't catch them or do anything, and then plus they're not really geared for the infantry fight. So I do think probably Warriors with great weapons or Longbeards with great weapons make the most sense as far as an infantry pick. In this case, there were more Thunderers on the side of Wei here. It didn't end up working out for him because he couldn't protect them. I think the spend on the cannons was maybe his downfall here. The cannons just didn't have a good way to pay back in this battle. And I'm curious why the cannons were picked. There's probably something I'm missing that could make sense as to why the cannons were picked. But they ended up being his downfall here, in my opinion. And just some great work here by the Giant Slayers. Really cleaning house on some important units. And so they got chevroned accordingly. So that was some nice play with the Giant Slayers. Indeed, a good unit for this matchup. Definitely agree with that one too. Armor-piercing damage, fast-moving. probably an invaluable support unit when you're in a Dwarf mirror match. But like I said, looking forward to hearing from you all. Hey, if you enjoyed this and you want to support the channel, a great way you can do it is click the like button if you liked the video. If you didn't like it, then make sure to click the dislike button. Honest feedback is appreciated. And if you do click the dislike button, I definitely want you to go to the comments and tell me why you didn't like it. That will help me a great deal. And of course, also, like I said earlier, hoping to see in the comments what you all think about the mirror matchup. Another great way to catch more content if you wanted is to hit the subscribe button if you feel like it. There's a bell there too, because YouTube wants you to have 2 steps in order to be notified about something you already clicked that you wanted to watch. Makes a lot of sense if you don't think about it, but feel free to click the subscribe button if you would like to. HeirofCarthage signing out for now. I will see you all soon with some more content in Total War Warhammer 2, and honestly, there's some other games we're going to be seeing here soon too. So, see you then.